It's time for the news.
Algeria has expressed its deep concern regarding the situation in the Caribbean region, particularly following the actions targeting Venezuelan tankers, calling on all parties to avoid escalation. The International Court of Justice (ICJ) has announced that Belgium has joined the proceedings initiated by South Africa against the Zionist entity for genocide in the Gaza Strip. Algeria makes its debut in the Africa Cup of Nations against Sudan today at 4 p.m. local time. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm your host, Masoud Sharfi. Prime Minister Sifi Gharieb has chaired a government meeting to examine a preliminary draft law on digital technology and a draft executive decree on private specialized education and teaching establishment for children with mental disabilities. More details with Mr. Said Bougazi.
The government began yesterday's meeting by examining a preliminary draft law setting out general rules relating to the digital sector. This is a key step in the creation of an efficient, secure and coherent national digital ecosystem, notably through the establishment of a modern governance model based on comprehensive digitization as the foundation for administrative performance in the management of public affairs. This draft bill, therefore, aims to establish a solid legal framework to support digital transformation, ensuring its sustainability and effectiveness and enabling our country to fully embrace the digital age. The government also examined a draft executive decree setting out the conditions for the creation, organization, operation, and supervision of private educational and teaching establishments specializing in children with specific needs who have mental disabilities. This draft text aims to support the creation of private institutions and improve their organization and operation to take into account the changes provided for in Law Number 2501 of 20th February 2025 on the protection and promotion of persons with special needs for better care, while contributing to strengthening the efforts made by the state to generalize care facilities for children with mental disabilities throughout the national territory.
Algeria has expressed its deep concern regarding the situation in the Caribbean region, particularly following the actions targeting Venezuelan tankers, calling on all parties to avoid escalation. Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar bin Jama, said that Algeria is closely following recent developments in the Caribbean region and with deep concern, especially regarding reports of actions directly targeting Venezuelan tankers. During a Security Council meeting on the threats to international peace and security, the diplomat warned recent developments could worsen tensions in the fragile regional context. Mr. Benjama stressed Algeria's call to avoid escalation, respect the United Nations Charter's principles, exercise restraint, and rely on dialogue and diplomacy as a primary means to resolve disagreements and maintain regional peace and stability. Algeria also recalled the importance of maintaining Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace, as proclaimed by the states of the region 11 years ago. Mr. Benjama said Algeria urges Latin America and the Caribbean organizations to promote dialogue and noted that tackling drug trafficking and transnational organized crime requires cooperative, respectful international action. He reaffirmed Algeria's call to follow the United Nations Charter and stressed that lasting peace can only be achieved through diplomacy, cooperation, and respect of international law. The proceedings of a plenary session devoted to the adoption of 5 legal texts have begun at the National People's Assembly (APN), chaired by the institution's president, Mr. Brahim Boughali. The plenary session, attended by the Minister of Relations with Parliament, Ms. Najiba Jilali, and members of the government, is devoted to the adoption of the organic law on the status of the judiciary, which aims to improve the functioning of the judicial public service, the draft law on the Highway Code, which aims to improve road safety, the draft law laying down general rules on trust services for electronic transactions and electronic identification, the proposed amendment to the Algerian Nationality Code, and the proposed law criminalizing French colonization in Algeria. The Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of African Affairs, Ms. Selma Bakhta Mansouri, has received the political activist and former Ghanaian parliamentarian Adiyoli Muhammad Barak on a visit to Algeria. Adiyoli Muhammad Barak's visit to Algeria is part of a tour of several African countries with a view to facilitating free movement and strengthening exchanges and communication between the continent's citizens. The meeting was an opportunity to reaffirm the importance of unity, solidarity, and cooperation between African peoples and states, and the need to continue efforts and initiatives aimed at strengthening continental cohesion and unifying positions and voices at the African level in the service of the continent's common causes. Referring to his visit to the Sahrawi refugee camps in Tindouf, Adiyoli Muhammad Barak reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's legitimate right to self-determination, recalling that the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic is the last colony in Africa and a founding member of the African Union.
I was also in Tindouf. I took the opportunity to visit the camps, which is being inhabited by our brothers and sisters from Western Sahara. And I must tell you that the issue of Western Sahara is an issue that I am passionate about, is an issue that all of us as Africans should be passionate about. Western Sahara is a founding member of the African Union. It is the only colony, so to speak, right now that needs, to be liberated. And it is our prayer, that sooner rather than later, all the issues with Western Sahara would be resolved.
That was the political activist and former Ghanaian parliamentarian Abdiyoli Muhammad Barak speaking. A multi-sectoral commission for reflection and consultation has been established at the headquarters of the National Observatory of the Civil Society, ONSC, in Algiers, on the occasion of the launch of the International Year of Volunteers for Sustainable Development 2026. The establishment of the Commission is part of the official global launch of the International Year of Volunteers for Sustainable Development 2026, announced by the United Nations on International Volunteer Day, in an effort to create a framework for the integration of volunteers in the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. This initiative also enshrines the culture of volunteering deeply rooted in the Algerian society and strengthens the role of civil society actors as well as their remarkable presence during the various stages that Algeria has undergone. Turkish Interior Minister Ali Yerkayali has announced that the black box from the plane that crashed yesterday evening near Ankara, killing all its passengers including the Libyan Chief of Staff and his advisors, has been found. The voice record and black box were found about 50 kilometers from the Turkish capital. The minister said that the relevant authorities had begun their investigation. However, the remains of the 8 people on board are still at the crash site, where debris is scattered over an area of 3 square kilometers. The aircraft had requested an emergency landing while flying over Haymana, but no contact had been established, he said. The cause of the accident was not immediately known. 408 people, including rescue teams, gendarmes, police and health services, 103 land vehicles and 7 aircrafts have been mobilized. The A3+ group at the UN Security Council, including Algeria, Somalia, Sierra Leone and Guyana, has affirmed in New York its full support for Somalia's security and stability, stressing the importance of providing adequate and sustainable funding for the African Union mission for support and stabilization in Somalia, ASEM, in order to safeguard the security gains achieved over recent years. More details with Miriam Barshi.
In a statement delivered during a Security Council session in Somalia, Sierra Leone's permanent representative, speaking on behalf of the A3+, said key concerns like ASEM's financing were not fully reflected, but they supported Resolution 2809, thanked contributing countries, and stressed preserving Somalia's security gains.
Some of our core concerns were not reflected in the text. The financing of ASEM has not been an essential issue throughout the negotiations, despite being the core concern. That being said, the A3 Plus voted in favor of Resolution 2809 in the spirit of compromise and in recognition of the need to have council authorization as the basis for continued support for ALSOM by international donors. We express our gratitude for the council's continued attention and support for ALSOM. We honor the sacrifices made by the troop contributing countries and underscore the imperative to preserve the hard-earned security gains and sacrifices made by the federal government of Somalia and the AU troop contributing countries.
He called for sustainable funding for ALSOM and Somali forces, warned that underfunding threatened security gains, and thanked partners supporting Somalia's peace and development.
We reiterate our call for predictable, sustainable, and adequate funding for ALSOM and Somali national forces at this critical juncture. The chronic underfunding of ALSOM seriously impedes its objective and risks reversing the progress achieved. Undermining the security gains over the years would have their implications for Somalia and the region. The A3 Plus expresses appreciation to all partners supporting Somalia's security and its path towards sustainable peace and development. We reaffirm our commitment to Somalia's sovereignty, unity, territorial integrity, and political independence.
The group explained that it participated in the negotiation process in a constructive spirit and in good faith, guided by the principle of listening to the country concerned while prioritizing Somali needs, and committed to constructive dialogue with all concerned members. The group renewed its support for Somalia's sovereignty, unity, territorial integrity and independence, expressing its appreciation to all partners supporting Somalia and its path towards peace and sustainable development.
In Sudan, as the conflict approaches the symbolic threshold of 1,000 days, the country is sinking into a war with no visible political end in sight. After ravaging Darfur, the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) are now tightening their grip on neighboring Kordofan, leaving in their wake deadly violence, an out-of-control humanitarian crisis, and a growing risk of regional destabilization. More details with Mr. Said Boghazi.
For several days, the Rapid Support Forces have been concentrating their offensives in the central region of Kordofan, where paramilitaries have made significant territorial gains, seizing Baba Nusa and then Heglig, a strategic oil site through which South Sudanese crude oil is transported to the city of Port Sudan on the Red Sea. Kadugli and Dilling, two already fragile cities, are now subject to a gradual encirclement. The UN Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Mohammed Khaled Khiyari, warned of an increasingly unstable and diffuse conflict dynamic. These developments, he stressed at a Security Council meeting convened urgently by the Sudanese government, reflect the increasingly complex nature of the conflict and its expanding regional dimensions, raising the risk of Sudan's neighbors being drawn into a regional conflict. In El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur and the last government stronghold in the region, the RSF laid siege for more than 540 days before capturing the city at the end of November. Its fall caused the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people and highlighted the extreme brutality of the attacking forces accused of ethnic massacres of civilians. For many observers, what is happening today around Al Ubaid, the capital of North Kordofan, is reminiscent of the stages that preceded the fall of El Fasher. Gradual suffocation, restrictions on movement, repeated attacks on civilian infrastructure, then collapse. Added to this territorial dynamic is a change in military means. Drone strikes, which are becoming increasingly frequent and sophisticated, are widening the scope of violence and increasing the number of civilian casualties.
The World Food Programme, WFP, has welcomed a contribution of $12.5 million from the government of Norway to help meet food needs in South Sudan. More details with Miriam Barshi.
In a statement, World Food Programme said that this contribution will enable the programme to deliver life-saving food assistance to the most vulnerable population groups in South Sudan, while also strengthening community resilience and supporting essential services for humanitarian operations in the country. Norway has contributed to the WFP in South Sudan amid worsening food insecurity and child malnutrition affecting 7.56 million people, 2.1 million children, and over 1 million pregnant and breastfeeding women. WFP Country Director Mary-Ellen McRoarty emphasized that food security drives peace and economic recovery. The funding will support smallholder farmers, the homegrown school feeding initiative and essential services, strengthening community resilience. Since 2020, Norway's total support to WFP in South Sudan exceeds $29 million. In the same connection, the United Nations World Food Programme warned that the crisis in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, due to ongoing fighting, could turn into a hunger catastrophe, noting that it is stepping up efforts to provide life-saving assistance to more than 210,000 of the most vulnerable people in the country. In a statement, the programme said that affected communities are facing extremely difficult conditions, lacking access to safe drinking water, medical care, and livelihoods, adding that violence has forced many people to flee to neighboring countries in search of food and shelter. It warned that the hunger crisis in the country could threaten to worsen without urgent action, stressing that not only displaced people are in dire need of assistance, but also the families hosting them. WFP warned that critical food insecurity and displacement risk a hunger catastrophe without urgent funding, requiring $350 million in the DRC, $39 million in Burundi, and $17 million in Rwanda.
The International Court of Justice, ICJ, has announced that Belgium has joined the proceedings initiated by South Africa against the Zionist entity for genocide in the Gaza Strip. Several countries have already joined this case before the highest judicial body of the United Nations, which sits in The Hague, including Brazil, Ireland, Bolivia, Colombia, Spain, and Mexico. In a landmark decision in January 2024, the ICJ warned of a real and imminent risk of irreparable harm to Palestinians and urged the Zionist occupation to prevent acts of genocide. It ordered legally binding provisional measures, including allowing humanitarian aid and preventing incitement to genocide through its lax enforcement mechanisms. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has condemned Zionist occupation's plan to establish 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, describing it as a dangerous measure aimed at consolidating its control over the entire Palestinian territory. More details with Miriam Barshi.
The ministry said in a statement that this is a direct extension of the policies of apartheid, colonization and annexation, which violate the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and destroy any real prospect for stability. For the Palestinian Authority, the decision cannot be separated from the Zionist entity's systematic policy of preventing any real possibility of establishing an independent and sovereign Palestinian state, denouncing an acceleration of the theft of Palestinian land and the escalation of settler terrorism. The Israeli occupation authorities announced earlier this week that they had approved the establishment of 19 settlements in the West Bank, bringing the total number of settlements approved in the last 3 years to 69. More than 500,000 settlers now live in the West Bank in settlements that are illegal according to the UN and in violation of international law, among some 3 million Palestinians. Settlements activities has intensified significantly in recent years, particularly since the start of the Zionist aggression against Gaza. Recently, a report by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed alarm at the record growth of Zionist settlements in 2025. Mr. Guterres condemned the relentless expansion of Zionist settlement activity in the occupied West Bank, including East al-Quds, threatening the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state. He also expressed concern about the alarming increase in settler violence, referring to attacks sometimes in the presence or with the support of the forces of the Zionist occupation.
Algeria makes its debut in Africa in the Africa Cup of Nations against Sudan. The Fennecs are among the main favorites in the competition. The Algerian team performed exceptionally well during the qualifying rounds for the Africa Cup of Nations. The Fennecs finished top of their group with 5 wins and 1 draw. The match is scheduled to kick off today at 4 p.m. local time. That was all for today's news bulletin. Stay tuned to Radio Algeria International.
2025, a year of major events, a year in which Africa takes off while the world faces deep crises.